Hey everyone, Dave Greco here and welcome back to the channel. So today I really want to talk about lighting and how we incorporate lighting into our own illustrations and what I really look for when I want to apply lighting into my own pieces. Lighting to me is super important. It took me a long time, I think when I was younger and in school, before I kind of realized what you could do with lighting and how you could use lighting to kind of change the composition of your piece, to have it affect the mood, the vibe that you're going for. And some of the strongest pieces that I fall in love with that other artists do, and I can show a couple of those pieces right here, ones that always really stand out and pop to me and really make me want to stare at it for even longer, is mostly because of the lighting and the color that they use in the lighting. And we're gonna paint for a little bit. We're gonna show some examples of how you can maybe apply some quick lighting and different techniques to try it out and things to look for. But I think the biggest thing we can do today is have a conversation about what you're trying to accomplish with your lighting, how big picture ideas to think about when you're looking at your own piece and how to incorporate those ideas into it, because I think that is the most important part. Instead of just watching one artist be like, this is how I apply a piece of light to it, and there's one way. They only go so far, but it's being able to think about how you can apply it to your own work that I think is going to do the most for all of us. So let's dive into a little bit into a piece I have prepped up, and let's try some lighting ideas and see what we can do. Here is a piece I painted about like 6 months ago. It ended up not being used for anything. I did do some thumbnails of it and start up to this form. I mean, honestly, this piece could exist right now without taking it any further. But I think there's a couple ideas that we can talk about on how we use lighting to our own advantage to make the whoever's looking at your piece, how to make their eyes focus on certain areas, and how to guide them to the piece. And that's super useful. And these are things that I really think about when I dive into it. So basically right now we already have like a pretty strong contrast between the background and the foreground character, which is this kind of like deer statue found in the woods. I think that was something I was going for. Wasn't really super finished. And then how do we go about what can we do to really make this piece pop? How to make it stand out? And what we would do is, how can we affect different ways to light the piece to really change the viewer's eyes? If I took out this foreground branch right here, a lot of this piece, let's do this. Try to do this in a way that can help people more and more with all your own work. And sometimes there's like maybe not enough going on compositionally where, we kind of have this thing going this direction and then he kind of shoots out over here. Is there any other ways that we can use lighting to kind of bring the viewer's eyes back into the piece and kind of hang around in the center? So there's a couple main things that I think about when I do high contrast or start to apply lighting to a piece, is what is the focal point of the piece? Where do I really want people to be looking at? And where do I really want to pop, to stand out? So one of the things I usually do, and you can do this at a bunch of different stages. I'm gonna try to show some examples right here. But a couple different stages where you can do this. You can do this when you're doing your thumbnails and doing your sketch. You could go into a pretty polished black and white if you want, and then start figuring out different lighting scenarios. Sometimes I might even wait till this part that we're at right now to even start applying lighting. I think one of the best ways you can do some quick lighting studies, and you can do a bunch of these if you want, if you're really trying to figure out some cool way to do lighting, is I just grab like an airbrush, a straight airbrush, and you can use this for my brush back. And the airbrush in my brush back is no different than your normal airbrush. I just use it all the time, so it's in there. So no worries about that. And I have an overlay layer, but I do want, I want the light to be pretty warm, right? We have a lot of cool shadows, so let's have some warm light. Is always a good thing to stand by. And I want to hang out in the kind of this leftish area up here. And really, so what we can do is, how can we cut some light across this character to make it pretty interesting? And we can do a bunch of different ways. What if we had something that was magical on the ground underneath that was, I'm going to juice it up a little bit more, kind of lighting it from underneath. Right, and so basically what you're doing is, in a really loose way, you're just trying to figure out some of the forms of the character. And this is going to happen when you start to kind of learn anatomy more and more. How is it all hitting the character? where do all the planes exist on a face or everything else. And sometimes I'll even take the airbrush eraser and kind of cut through different parts. But you know, some of this might have hit all these little areas. It probably wouldn't hit any more of the face. You probably just have it all hitting underneath his jaw and all that. But then down here, you can do the same thing. Maybe you can brush on these hands. It comes on this part of the leg. And then obviously you would have a bunch of this being lit underneath. Right, and this is this whole idea that maybe there is these things down here that are glowing. That's kind of giving off a whole bunch of light. And then you can actually erase because you probably want some more contrast to some of the shadows and everything down here. So it's not the whole thing. Right, and then it's like, okay, you might be able to save that to the side. Maybe that's one way we can think about lighting it. It's really just quick ways to kind of tell a story. And I think that's a really important part of lighting, is being able to tell a story. So let's try a different one right here. And then you could always do some like dappled light, maybe coming through leaves. That always looks really good. And you can do the same thing just with like a soft airbrush. I kind of dab it on real light. And maybe this is where it hits a bunch. You have a bunch hitting, because you know the face is always so important. And there's definitely scenarios where you could have a lot of the face hanging out in the darkness and kind of add a type of mood to the piece. But you could also, you know, we're starting to figure out different little ways to pepper in some of this light. You know, you don't want to go too crazy. I'm really trying to focus the eyes going from up the arm into the most saturated spots, which is happening around his jaw and the face. And maybe that'll have some cool little effects. One thing I like to do also is you could actually, and you have to be careful with an overlay layer. I do use it a lot when I'm building up my saturation in my light. But I think if you use it kind of carefully, you can get some pretty cool looking pieces with it. So it's like, what's another stage we can take this up another level of this kind of little bit of dappled lighting to really make it pop? And sometimes in these light spots, I like to get a little bit more kind of deep as far as kind of reds and oranges that might come out of it. And you can do the same thing. I do another overlay on top, and I just go real soft on these some spots. Maybe gets a little bit around the edges of that light you just put in. It gets a little more red in there. Just real careful. Maybe just on one spot, and maybe it's even too much. You can always grab the opacity on your layer right here, bring it down a little bit, and just kind of see where it fits in real nice. And basically from this stage, once I've done my initial lighting as far as the overlay goes, you can go in and I'll just make like another layer. This is when we get a little layer crazy. So you can always flatten these down. You can name them. You can do whatever you want. And then you can actually start taking the actual kind of color that exists right here and kind of render it out. So it's not just the full kind of airbrush softness happening everywhere. Maybe we saw a little bit more of these kind of cracks happening in these light areas, right? And we're taking, let's say, this light color that exists now in the piece. We're just grabbing some of these lighter parts. And we're just adding these small kind of little highlights. And so we're slowly just been bringing the light of this piece up a little bit. You know, and that's another way we can handle it. And we can do this with so many different things. We can do this if you're doing just a normal human character's face. You know, I do overuse a lot of kind of lighting scenarios, a lot of faces of like cutting light. Something I'm trying to not keep doing over and over. I just love how it looks. So it's something I'm always working on. You know, we always have our go-tos, right? And so that's just like another example. And then always you can make another layer. You can always do these on the same layer, but usually when I'm doing kind of big kind of movements in the piece, it's I like to make a new one. And so this is even using the same airbrush. And you could even grab something really light. I'm eyedropping some of the color right here. Grabbing like a little kind of like a lighter desaturated version of that color. You can grab an airbrush And you can really really make it seem pretty bright. And you're just kind of like slightly brushing it on top here, right? You go back in, and this is with an eraser right now. You can cut in areas of contrast back on the piece. You know, it's those areas of contrast, and it's really gonna make it pop. You know, when you look at a piece that has such high contrast, it's always like a big win because it really draws you in and picks up that intensity, right? So, you know, this might be a little too much as far as that goes. So you can always grab this opacity and play with it. You know, that's why I really like making new layers too. It's because you can grab this opacity after, drop it down, see if that works okay. You know, a lot of different ways. And one thing we think about lighting too is we think a lot about kind of like balanced light and what kind of color that does to a piece. And this is how and this can maybe go off a little bit of lighting, but I think it's a good thing to talk about real briefly, is I always talk about bringing color into your shadow areas so they don't stay muddy. And I think that goes into lighting. So basically, as we've been painting right here, we kind of notice that as I've been painting, this looks like a little bit more, I've got, you know, a red and pinkish, you know, hue compared to here, which is very kind of, you know, gray and blue. And that always gives me ideas like, what if we take that small part and we just kind of pick it up a little bit just to make it pop. So right here, you can see where it exists. We have a little bit of that red in there as opposed over here, which is a little bit more violet. So if we take this and just kind of juice it up just a couple steps, we're a little bit more saturated and we're a little bit lighter. And then that's when I'll start going underneath and kind of bring some of that color, real subtle, just a real soft blend. And this kind of goes into that kind of soft rendering that I like to do with a lot of my work. You know, and then basically as we come out, we can see more kind of like that kind of balanced light. Maybe that exists, you know, underneath down here. And so basically you're thinking, so down here might be more of this actual color, which kind of informs us that we might need more of this down here. But also this kind of balanced light is also going to pick up on a lot of these areas too. And that kind of color, if it's already if it's making its way all the way up to the other side of the jaw. But those are a couple quick techniques. I especially use overlay to try to kind of block in little lighting scenarios to try to figure out a piece. I think it's pretty quick. It's pretty easy. You can do a bunch of different scenarios. You can try, you know, lighting from the side, lighting from the top. You know, have the whole head in the darkness, and then all the focus of the lighting is on the chest. It's really, really easy. The biggest thing is though, just keeping those kind of middle values for your piece. We didn't get super crazy as far as the highlights go and the kind of, you know, higher values as we were painting this main character. So when we do apply the lighting, it feels like you're actually putting lighting on an unlit character. I think that's pretty important too. So thank you for being patient on the channel. I know we haven't had as many videos lately, just been super busy. I'm trying to up the quality of the videos when I can. So thank you so much for your support on here. It means a ton. I hope you can take some of these small ideas into your own work. That's what would mean the most to me. And I will see everybody in the next video. Thanks so much.